Welcome back. Outside Minds podcast. Because you've already seen too much, bro.
They only added it so it could be like a ritual.
They're saying there's these, the end of times, right? There's all these signs.
Do you think we would know? Like, do you think the general public would know this game?
Take a picture for $5.
You have a purpose in life, and if you don't fulfill it, you will come back until you fulfill it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Outside Minds podcast. I'm your host and creator, Stilo Free. This is the other host and creator,
Dot420.
and I am super excited today. We have a very, very amazing guest. She is a clinical psychologist with over 20 years specializing in neurofeedback, QEEG mapping, and evidence-based psychotherapies. She treats people with ADHD, anxiety, and trauma. She has parental support. She also works with people on the autism spectrum. Her name is Dr. Leeann Marquez. I hope I'm saying that right. Please.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Please let them know a little bit about yourself, and if you want to, let them know about any websites or where they can find you or anything like that.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot that you just said there, so let me see if I can get all that out.
Okay.
But basically, I practice neurofeedback. I haven't always been a psychologist,
Okay.
but it's been something that I discovered on my own.
Oh, wow.
I had a brain injury, actually.
Oh.
I was exposed to some toxic chemicals,
Oh, no.
and I lucked out and I started working with people who did this brain mapping process.
Oh, wow.
Most of them were psychologists, and I noticed a difference in my brain. So that
Wow.
was me getting hooked on the science.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I became a licensed psychologist, and I love what I do.
Wow.
I work at Orange County Health Psychologist in Irvine, California.
Nice.
Wow. Okay. Do you have a website to where they can find out about your stuff?
Yeah, it should be OCHP, Orange County Health Psychologist.com.
Okay, cool. I'll make sure I put
Yep.
that in the caption for the people that are wondering and stuff. Because you're basically, I want to talk about this because you have a PSYD versus a PhD. I looked it up. I think if I'm getting this right, that means you're more on the practicing side of it, right? As opposed to the research side. Am I correct?
That's correct. So usually people with a PhD are more research focused. The Psy.D is usually people that want to practice as a psychologist.
Okay.
However, I love research, so I have some great research for you guys if you're
Oh,
interested.
great. Awesome.
Yes.
Yes. We want to know.
Yes.
I'm super excited for today. It connects to a few things I've been researching lately. But first of all, you specialize in QEEG. Can you elaborate what that is?
Yes. So basically, are you guys familiar with like an EEG? Like when
Yeah.
people have seizure disorder? Okay. Well, sorry, my earbud fell out. But
I'm not though.
basically,
Can you just quickly explain it?
yeah. So an EEG analyzes brainwaves.
Mhm.
Okay.
So when you have a seizure disorder, typically a sleep specialist or a neurologist wants to see where that seizure activity is coming from. So what a QEEG is, it takes that same data, same science, and we quantify it and we make a brain map.
Oh,
And the
wow.
brain map
That's
tells
crazy.
us which parts of your brain have overactivity or underactivity or connection activity
Oh.
difficulties.
Okay. And did that come from epilepsy research?
That's a good question. I want to say that it might have started back in the 70s when they were actually trying to figure out how to measure psychophysiology.
Okay.
But I'm not too sure, actually what the science came from with the actual seizure disorder. That's a good question.
Okay, yeah, because my friend's epileptic, and we're gonna talk about it later. But she says when she has seizures and stuff like that, she's had like premonitions before and stuff like that. But first, before we get into the spiritual stuff and all that kind of stuff, can you explain the different brainwave states and how they relate to the way we experience the world?
Okay, I'll try my best here. So
You can do
we
it like
have
just quick and easy if you want to.
Okay, so we have slow frequencies, we have fast frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Slow frequencies like delta and theta help us sleep. Faster frequencies like beta and gamma for super high concentration, sometimes stress disorders. And then we have alpha and SMR, which is really just this grounding, meditative state, prayer. Usually when you close your eyes, you feel that relaxed feeling.
Okay.
That's what that frequency is going to do.
Nice. Okay, nice. So I want to talk about alpha and beta real quick because is that the brainwave state that we're usually operating in day to day?
Depends on the person.
Okay. Okay.
So
Cool.
right? So I would say typically if you're talking and you're having a good conversation with someone, most likely it's beta. But sometimes people who have ADHD or who are in the spectrum as well, or brain injury, even though they're talking and they should have beta, they feel very like bogged down. They don't have enough of it. So it depends on the person.
So maybe does that maybe relate to people's like social anxiety or social disorders and stuff like that?
It can. So if you have a lot of that fast frequencies in the areas responsible for trauma and panic, of course, you're going to have more of that.
Okay, I want to talk about beta real quick because I heard you, first of all, you're on my mom's live TikTok, so I was watching that, and I heard you say that some people who are trauma victims, they kind of have trouble getting out of the beta brainwave state. Can you talk about that? Is that associated with the fight or flight survival mode?
Yeah, it can be. So like every disorder, so that's why I tell people like every brain is not the same. We have about 12 different phenotypes. Think of it like blood types. And depending on the person and what kind of brain they have, if they've had any injuries, we're going to have a mixture of those things.
Wow.
So sometimes I say that with an asterisk, people with trauma, what happens is they're in that hypervigilant fight or flight state. They can't get out of that beta. And so the goal for them is to actually quiet down that beta and use it appropriate, not in this everyday state of life, and help them manage their feelings better.
Now, is this a result of like a defense mechanism of their brain putting them into that brainwave state because of the trauma that they underwent?
I would say so, because with any defense mechanism, it's that there's a fear, something that actually provoked us to feel so scared at one point. Some of us shift out of it, some of us don't.
Okay.
So I think I always tell people when I'm looking at their brains, like, it doesn't matter if there's a real threat or not. It could be a bear chasing you. It could be that you're dehydrated. It could be that you're sweaty. Your brain interprets that as a stress signal.
Wow.
Our minds tells us, is this appropriate or is this not appropriate?
What if your bank account is in the negative?
That will trigger some data for a lot of people.
I have a question that may be in regards to that. So almost a year ago, I totaled my car, and I was going pretty fast, and I went head on into the center divider, and I don't remember hitting it. Does my brain like block that out to prevent trauma, or what happens there?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes people's brains do shut down to preserve our psyche, right? Because there's the mind and the brain. So the brain just operates organically, but the mind's job is to say, okay, is this safe for us to remember it? Is this safe for us to actually manage this? Or do we panic and run? Do we panic and freeze? Do we panic and fight back? So the mind tells the brain what to do.
Okay.
And I always tell people, like, we're battling two different like situations here. Like, I have to help your mind process differently, but if your brain is stuck in this rigid pattern, we all have it, we need to come together and try to get them both to mirror de-stress lifestyle, de-stress frequencies.
And that's the very important part of your practice, right? Because I think, is that why when people are undergoing therapy and they're talking with somebody, repressed memories could come up?
So that's a good question. So let me see if I can explain this, because I have a little pyramid idea, right?
Okay.
So basically on the bottom of the pyramid is going to be that slow frequency. That's where we store all these repressed memories.
Oh, wow.
So beta's at the top, and that's where they stay in that hypervigilant state.
Okay.
So once we try to get calmer, that's when those repressed memories get closer to our minds.
Okay.
And that's why people have that flooding effect where they're like, oh my gosh, this feels unsafe because now I'm really feeling it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Amazingly interesting. So let's shift that over to your work and how you help people. Can you explain how you use this information to help people?
Yeah. So what I do a brain map first, and I tell people, like, okay, I have your history. That's how you interpreted everything. But the brain is giving me this raw, organic, like, this is what the result of that is, however it happened. So then I create a treatment plan or a protocol that says, okay, your frontal lobe either has too much fast activity. Let's just decrease that.
Okay.
Or maybe your temporal lobes, which is the amygdala, fight or flight, has too much fast activity. Let's slow it down. Help you go into that calmer alpha, maybe SMR state.
Wow.
So it depends on whatever I find with the patient. Nobody's ever the same.
Okay, nice. Do you ever offer the tip or the do you ever offer the advice of getting into meditation for your patients?
You know, I do, but here's my philosophy. Some people believe they're meditating and they're not.
Okay.
Because their brain, right? So it's like, okay, meditate, but they're still in that beta state.
Okay.
So it's so hard because I want to tell people to do it, but if they're doing it the wrong way because they don't know any different.
And they think they're doing it right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you meditate
It's so
yourself,
hard.
right?
I do, but I know my brain patterns, so I know
Okay.
how to actually do it the right way.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips for the average person that feels like that, you know, maybe they're beginning to do it or maybe they don't know if they're doing it right or not? Do you have any tips for them?
Yes. One, close your eyes.
Okay.
Usually when you close your eyes, alpha kicks up super fast.
Okay.
Usually, right?
Yeah.
Maybe for about 10 minutes, your brain will start to say like, all right, we're getting into that alpha zone. Then do a lot of deep breathing because that does slow down the nervous system.
Let me ask you a question that just popped in my mind. I think there's something called aphantasia. I don't know if I'm saying the right word, but it's the ability for someone to picture something in their imagination. Is it? Am I saying the right word? Oh, you don't know much
I
about it?
don't know much about that, but where have you heard that?
Oh, it's. I guess there's some people that can't imagine visually something. So I was gonna say if there's a correlation between the people that kind of have trouble getting out of beta and if there's a correlation there, but I don't know. Maybe.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about dissociative identity disorder. Since we're talking about trauma victims, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Are you familiar with that?
A little
at
bit.
all?
I have a general idea. I think it's where a trauma victim kind of creates a split identity in order to store the trauma or in order to deal with it. I think
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. So it's a very rare condition.
Wow.
But I've had patients who've had this, and it's very hard for them. But basically, being able to identify with a different alter, a different state of mind, they go to a safer place, usually, right?
Wow.
And so I had a patient in the past she was 50 years old, but she regressed into like a 5-year-old because that was where she felt some trauma, but she also felt safe there as a child. So she would have to write herself a note, like as an adult, like, please trust Leeanne because she's helping you, because that 5-year-old self had no idea.
So let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
Was it when she was a 5-year-old, was it her 5-year-old self of her, or was it a different identity of a 5-year-old? Like a completely...
It was, I would assume, because I didn't know her at 5 years old, I would assume that was her at 5 years old. And what I saw when we were doing neurofeedback, that she had a lot of theta, which is that disassociated state. It's like when you're about to fall asleep.
That's
It was so elevated.
Okay.
So I think, right, because this is like one of the only cases that I can bring up now, is that I think what happens when people are in that trauma state, they just kind of go offline, right?
Wow.
Their frontal lobes, which is that executive functioning, planning, organizing, kicks offline. And they go back into this other primitive part of our minds or our psyches where we are just a little bit slower so we can deal with the fear that's presented to us.
Like that chick on Nurse Ratched, remember when she switched back and forth to like a crazy person, then a little kid, and then when she was her regular self, she was so stressed out because she was just over it. She didn't remember anything from the other states.
Is that at all associated with schizophrenia at all?
It's a completely different disorder, but it's interesting because the people who've had schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, and I've seen their brains, they do have a similar effect, which is that slowing is very elevated.
Wow. That's interesting.
I kind of think of it like if your brain is in this like daydreamy state, this fog-like state, it's really hard to stay present in that beta where you can be in reality. Because
being grounded.
The mind, exactly.
Okay.
It's biochemical. Sometimes, I mean, all of it comes down to biochemical, but it's just interesting to see that the brain can do the exact same frequency and look so different depending on the person.
Yeah, and that gets into, you know, back in the days, like in ancient cultures and stuff, instead of, you know, being called like, you know, a schizophrenic or something was wrong with someone, those kind of people in the village, they look to like as the shamans and stuff like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're picking up on a different field of reality than base reality. And we'll talk about that in a second. But since we were talking about dissociative identity disorder, I want to talk about MK Ultra a little bit. Have you studied that at all?
A little bit, actually, a little bit. Something's getting my feed, and it's just so fascinating because I know that there are so many like researchers of the world who have used it in different elements of life, right? Like the movie Men Who Stare at Goats. I don't know if you've seen that.
Now it keeps coming up on the podcast.
I bring that up all the time on the podcast. Yes.
Yeah, I promise that's going to be the next movie I watch.
We have to watch that.
I'll give you a shout when I watch it. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, no, it's such a good movie.
Yes.
But movies like that, it's like they're touching on reality because the government agencies that have been doing MK Ultra, they use the same science, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like neurofeedback and biofeedback, even though I'll get into that another time, but basically it's like not a lot of people know what it is, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, this is new. I'm like, this has been around since the 70s. And if it's been around since the 70s, that means the government knew about it for a long
before
time,
that.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I was gonna ask you about that in particular too, because we had a post blow up on TikTok of one of the clips of one of our other episodes, and it was us talking about how there could be a correlation between trauma and people having supernatural abilities. Have you experienced that at all, or can you speak on that at all?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've had a lot of experiences with patients who have had lots of trauma, and sometimes this is kind of my own like personal belief, but I think sometimes trauma awakens a different part of us. And it's almost like it jolts our psyches into like, hey, something is wrong, but you're meant for more sometimes, right? Wow. Like I'm trying to summarize a little bit. Sorry, keep blowing on my ear. And I think that when that happens, people who want to heal from that, they start to be able to just tap inwards more.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of us are, believe it or not, we think we're in beta, but sometimes we're in this autopilot state, like almost like an NPC, right? We're just grinding it out every day, and we're not really thinking about ourselves, but sometimes trauma has a way to bring us back to ourselves to heal. And I think that awakens things in people. Yeah.
Maybe it's just a way of, you know, just having us in a situation to where we have to figure out how we can, you know, manipulate our mental states and be able to jump from different brain waves when we have to. You know what I mean? To bring it back to MK Ultra, in my personal opinion, I think they were using the science of the dissociative identity disorder to create different personalities for people in order to trigger them, in order to do, you know, certain things like assassinations and stuff like that. Do you believe in that at all? Do you think they were ever successful to do anything like that?
If they were successful, I would assume that because of the things we see in the world today, that could be the only explanation. Because sometimes I sit back and I go, why are people so easily influenced, or why are people gravitating towards a certain like way of behaving? And I know that there's these phenomenons like groupthink, right? Like that is a thing, like that's measured in psychology literature. But sometimes I'm like, how do they get people so easily influenced? And everything in the world has a frequency, right? And we just don't always think of it as something that can influence us. And I think that has happened. And I definitely believe that we are more sensitive than we realize. Like I think a lot of us are waking up to these things that are influencing us.
It's in the music, it's in the media, it's in the movies.
Everything.
And it's crazy to tack on to that point. You know, when you have these, you know, mass shootings or you have these assassinations, and you study these characters and these people, you look into their background, and there's a correlation there. There's always some weird stuff, or like, you know, maybe some trauma or something like that, or just weird glitchy things about the people. You know, they're, you know, like you said, some people are easily influenced, and it makes you wonder the people that are doing these crazy kind of things that shift these movements that make you think like, like that's not something regular. You know
And after you see like mugshots and they look crazy, like they've been through some mental games. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about Jay Gunkelman a lot. He's brilliant as a researcher. He's helped clinicians in my field for so long. And he talks about a lot of things that maybe normal therapists wouldn't talk about. So I highly encourage his channel, NeuroNoodle. But what I was going to say is, like, he found these 12 different phenotypes, and these phenotypes exist in everyone. We may have one, we might have two, we might have three. But what I can say is that sometimes when you start looking at the patterns and the clusters of different types of people, you can tell, like, this person's going to struggle more with like physiological issues in the world. So like cancer or maybe stomach issues, right? Like you can just kind of get a flavor of what types of things influence other people or more impactful in a negative or positive way.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if some of that has to do with that.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I'm a big believer in the principle of mentalism. I told you about it a little bit. And I believe, you know, your mind is a powerful thing. Not only do thoughts create reality, but I think that might speak to the point that, you know, a lot of people, like, you know, if you think you're going to be sick, you're going to be sick kind of thing, you know? And I think there might be some kind of pattern as to the phenotypes they have and the kind of thinking patterns that they might be more prone to or not. I don't know, just a thought of mine.
No, for sure.
Let's talk about functional lateralization a little bit, because I want to talk about the difference between the left brain hemisphere and the right brain hemisphere. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So simple terms is like usually the left is associated with like logic and just very structural thinking, and the right hemisphere is more for creative thinking and emotion. That's a general statement. But I think it's much more complex because our brain uses different like networks, right? To be able to have certain things pulled off in our whole body. So that's kind of like the gist of the left and the right hemisphere.
Okay, nice. Yeah, because now I want to talk about Robert Monroe, because he was a radio broadcaster in the 70s. And what he figured out was if you play a frequency in one ear and you play a different frequency in the other ear, your brain will compensate them, and it'll basically play the frequency in between, and that manipulates the brainwave states. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay, so when I first got started in neurofeedback, there's a psychologist in St. Louis, and he was telling me about this, where he would play beta in one ear and he would play theta, and then the brain would understand alpha.
Wow.
And that's how he would influence the brain to produce more alpha. So fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how the brain knows how to compensate and use what it needs, and how it knows how to organize that. I haven't seen it done in person, but he told me about it.
It's interesting that you explain it that way, because I feel like as you go up more, like when you go up like alpha, beta, when you go up to the more the focus level, it's just more like of a left brain control or dominance, and as you go more like down to like theta and delta and like trance and deep sleep and stuff, it's more of a little bit of relinquishing of control of the left brain. Would you say so?
You know, I never thought of it that way, because I thought of it more like the frontal lobe is more of that top heavy beta, really focus and concentration.
Okay.
And when we meditate and when we pray and we close our eyes, the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe, which is at the crown in the back, floods with alpha and theta. And there's this thing called an alpha theta crossover effect, where the deeper you get into prayer and meditation, you go into that theta state.
Okay.
And I tell people that's where you want to start, like planting the seeds of what you want to change in your life.
Okay.
Okay.
So people who have trauma or even addictions, they don't think that there's a different way. They're just looping on, this is my reality. This is my reality.
Yeah.
But once you get into that slower state, it's like a self-hypnosis.
Yeah.
And I tell people, like, you're hypnotizing yourself for what you want versus like, I don't know how other hypnotherapists work, but it's like they're just doing it for you. And you have to make sure that they have the best intentions for you. Right? So that's my dilemma with that.
That's kind of like music, because music can get you into different brainwave states, and like we said earlier, people are starting to realize that we're influenced. You know what I mean? And if you're hypnotized by music and you're listening to these songs that might have certain lyrics or certain themes, you might be a little bit more influenced by those themes, you know, spending time in those brainwave states. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you get the beat, which has its own frequency, right? Or its own rhythm. And then you have the song lyrics, and then they're planting those seeds into your mind, right?
During those frequencies,
During those frequencies. So it's like, and then you're willingly consenting to it, right? And then you wonder why your life is the way it is. It's like,
and it's going out to the masses, so we're constantly just bringing it upon each other at the same time.
Yes. I mean, ancient cultures knew this. That's why they played music, right?
Yes. Rituals and dance, song and dance. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute. They have a program, project called HemiSync. A study that the CIA did in the 70s as well. Basically, what they're doing is they're using the frequencies, the binaural beats, to basically sync their brain hemispheres, and it's allowing them to do things like remote viewing, astral projection. It's giving them psychic abilities and stuff like that. Can you speak on that a little bit?
You know, this is a little bit outside my pay grade, but I will say that I've read that article or the release document, and it's really interesting because I don't feel like anything they said in there was false. And like reading it from a researcher standpoint, I'm like, oh yeah, I follow that. I follow what they're doing. How they did that, it's a little bit outside of what I've ever experienced. Right?
For sure.
Well, it's also interesting because the esoteric traditions and the mystical traditions, they associate the divine masculine with the left brain, the logic and the reason, and they associate the divine feminine with the subconscious and the dreaming and the astral realm and stuff. So basically the idea in most of these systems is to sync those two. In meditation, also in most traditions and stuff like that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'm going to just add on to what you said, because we're this whole being, right? And I think that's the hardest part for many providers in any field, is that we compartmentalize, right? Like right does this, left does that, heart does that, you know? And I'm like, we're so complex. And I tell people that the goal of at least my treatment plan and how I help people is that we want your whole body to be in sync. In this
be
pattern.
one. Yes, be one.
Yes.
Yeah. And others on the other mystical side of it, that's like in most traditions, you know, it's like balancing the 7 chakras. You know what I mean? Body and mind, as above, so below. I want to talk about a little bit more about that, because, you know, when you have like a Kundalini awakening, or some people have like a mystical experience, or when they're on psychedelics, when they're on LSD, when they're doing DMT, they're showing, more brain hemisphere synchronization and stuff like that. And we're also seeing something called the default mode network that gets either shut off, or the ability for its control is reduced a little bit. Can you talk about that a little bit, or the default mode network at all?
Yeah, so the default mode network, there's different networks, right, in the brain. Like, they basically think of it like these connection channels. So it's not just like, here's your frontal lobe FZ, and here is your left T3, T4, right? And we just do one thing there. It has to communicate back and forth into these networks. And so our default mode is to help us just to say, like, this is what we need to ground and stay present in.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen in the past, a lot of people who have struggled either with addictions or they use different substances and they have these bad trips, right? Their brains may not be able to handle that kind of substance. on the other side, there's people who are addicts, and I see them like, well, it makes sense why you would use this substance because it's pseudo fixing that area, that network, right?
Wow.
So like,
So that could be why certain
Yeah.
people like maybe who have ADHD do better when they have Adderall versus people who don't struggle with that and they take Adderall and they have a completely different reaction to it.
I was gonna say like coffee.
Okay.
Right? Like, for example, coffee.
For sure.
The people who have ADHD, they love coffee, right? Because their brains don't have enough of that beta, and caffeine just helps increase that beta, right?
Wow.
But somebody who has anxiety disorder, when they take caffeine, they're like, that's not my drug of choice.
Yeah.
Or people who are alcoholics, they have so much beta, they can't get out of it. And when they drink alcohol, it's a downer. It suppresses it. And they're like, I don't feel that beta anymore.
Wow.
So when I worked at treatment centers, I would always ask, like, what's your drug of choice? Because you are pseudo trying to fix it when you have an addiction towards something. And so
when they
I
do
have a
the
lot of, like,
psychotherapy, you're basically almost fixing the addiction from the other side.
correct.
That's interesting. That's cool.
That's so interesting.
But it helps them understand themselves instead of being
For
shamed,
sure.
like,
For
oh,
sure.
you're an addict, and why can't you get your life together? This is literally the substance that helps you
Yeah.
function, right?
Yeah.
And there's alternatives, but we just don't teach it to people.
I always
you
tell
know?
people, I started smoking weed when I was 16, and I always tell people, if I started smoking weed like in 9th grade or 8th grade, I probably wouldn't have dropped out of high school. You know what I mean? Because there was something about it that balanced me, you know, and later in my life,
I started smoking in 7th grade and I graduated high school.
yeah. And later in my life, I did some inner work. I did some shadow work. And then I told myself, you know, maybe I'm going to try not smoking. And after trying not smoking, it was much more easier to quit once I, you know, faced my demons per se.
Yeah.
Once I did the inner work, once I kind of, you know, faced the things mentally that I wasn't facing before. You know what I mean?
I do. And I think that, I don't know how other people practice, but I think this inner demon part of us is just it is a part of us, like you said, like the shadow, and we need to learn to understand it
And acknowledge it.
and learn how, and then it becomes a lot easier to manage, right? It's like the baby who cries all the time. It's like, it's not doing that to be annoying. It's like, it needs
It has a
something.
need. Yeah.
I partake in my psychedelics, so but I give it up to mushrooms and a little bit of LSD for helping me get out of like a depression and stuff, because I used it as a tool, not for fun. And it really helped me.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting connection we're making here, because I always told people, you know, when you do psychedelics or you do mushrooms, the people that are psychonauts or do it all the time, they'll tell you have to be in the mental place for it. You can't do it right after a breakup or right after someone dies or something like that, because you still have internal work to do when that happens. So it's very interesting that you're saying, you know, mostly people's drug of choice is related to their psychology and their physiology. That's a very interesting correlation there, for sure.
Yeah. And even in my clinic, we do ketamine assisted therapy.
Oh yeah,
now,
that's
right?
getting really big now. Yeah.
It's so big, right? And I always look back and I'm like, why ketamine? But again, controlled substances, you know, big pharma,
Big
blah,
pharma,
blah, blah, right?
yeah.
Right.
What about
But then
MDMA?
the other people, I don't think that's used right now.
It's
They're doing
not.
studies.
They've done studies, but it's still on the more like
Yeah.
druggy side, you know, street druggy side.
Right.
Wow. What do you think of all that?
Which part?
Of like, you know, the alternative therapies with like ketamine and stuff like that.
You know, I'm actually open to it.
Okay.
Sometimes I think you have to have a really good, like, if you're going to use a person, which I think you need to, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure they screen out everything and making sure that you're ready,
Yes.
right? Because even if you have this desire, but like you said, you haven't done your inner work, like you have to understand that anytime you take a substance, it doesn't even mean it's something like ketamine. It could be anything. And you're not ready for the possible side effects of anything. That is the more irresponsible choice I think anybody can make. But when you feel like you're grounded and you're ready to take on a different approach, I think it could work.
That's why when they do ayahuasca ceremonies, you have to do like 2 weeks of, of a diet, of, meditation, fasting, all that stuff to be ready
they'll
for
make you
that.
do like a silent retreat and stuff
You have
like
to
that.
do all
and stuff
that,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, because I was just going to talk
and
about
words
that.
have frequencies.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
gonna talk about that. These people that are going, and doing these, ayahuasca ceremonies, and they're shitting themselves in the wood and stuff like that. You know, I feel like psychedelics are like a cheat code in order to achieving that union of the left brain and the right brain. And if you aren't, I think the people that are doing these ceremonies, it's taking you through that trauma. Like, you're facing it head on. These people are saying that they're having these mystical experiences where they're talking to dead relatives and stuff like that, or they're just crying out years and years of trauma, or they're just having these repressed memories being awakened from when they're 3 years old in these ayahuasca trips. And it's just super interesting that psychedelics is some sort of cheat code to kind of help you navigate what we call life. You know what I mean?
For sure. And I feel like, dare I say, like, is it really a cheat code, or is this actually just like
'Cause it's
what anything does for us?
part
right?
of
Like
nature,
food.
right? I mean,
Right.
Well,
like
with any
food
cheat
has a
code,
frequency.
you have to be careful with the way you use it. You know what I mean? Like, like we said, you could have a bad trip. But I feel
sure,
like
but a cheat code is more like you're altering something. A mushroom, you pick it from the ground and eat it.
that's true. That's true.
That's what I mean in that sense.
Yeah. So I want to talk about something else real quick. We talked a little bit about acquired savant syndrome. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Acquired savant. I don't know if I know about acquired.
Okay.
I just know a little bit about the savant. Are you talking about like people who have higher functioning autism?
Oh, I mean, like there's this guy, Jason Padgett. He got mugged outside of a bar, and then basically what happened was he started to have all these crazy insights into like the way reality works, and these like insights into like E equals MC squared and the function of reality, and how sacred geometry is like the code of reality and all that stuff. But it's basically he's having like higher brain functionality because of a brain injury.
Whoa. Okay. No, I mean, I haven't heard about this guy, but there's this Dr. Ramakandran that talks about like head injuries and even these seizure disorders, and how that kind of stirs these like new mystical experiences in people. And I think he was like really fascinated because he was wondering, like, these people are seen as if they're schizophrenic and they have psychosis, but obviously there's something real happening. And so I find it interesting that there's only a handful of people that are willing to like ask the question, like, is this actually something that's dysfunctional, or is this actually just something someone's experiencing that is moving them through a different phase of their life? I don't think a lot of doctors dabble in that.
Is it like when people like get an injury and they wake up either speaking another language or have a deep accent from somewhere else, and it's like, where'd that come from? There's something mystical
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I mean, I wish I had those answers, and I wish there was more people experimenting with these types of like experiences with people.
Yeah. It reminds me of my friend Desiree. Because she has epilepsy, and I remember one time this made me look into a little bit more in the way epilepsy works and the way the different parts of the brain are speaking to each other. Because she said one time she had this seizure, and then when they were helping her calm down and helping her come to, she was saying, all I want is the purple cookies. All I want is the purple cookies. That's all I want. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about, but like, okay, like she was starting to settle down and stuff like that. So it was right when her friend's mom was getting back from the grocery store, and they're bringing all the groceries in, and then they pull out this pack of cookies, and the packaging is purple.
Wow.
So it's like I'm wondering,
Wow.
and I think I did look it up, and there is some research with a correlation to mystical experiences and premonitions to people who have epilepsy and stuff like that. So I was
Yes.
I was wondering if you ever do any work with epileptic patients at all, and the QEEG mapping behind
Yes.
that.
I was like, there's so much you said right there. And I was just like, I have so many ideas. But yeah, like a lot of times I tell people, like, I'm not an MD, I don't profess to be, but in the literature, it says that neurofeedback can actually treat seizure disorders.
Wow.
Because what's happening in the brain is that they're having these spikes. And if they're spikier or happening more frequently, that's where we have the shaking and we're having the auras and all those other experiences.
Wow.
But some of us, like myself, I have them and they're just silent seizures, meaning I know when I'm having them, but they're not medical criteria to treat with medication. But what's happening in the brain is that when we use neurofeedback, we're trying to add a different frequency to help stop those seizures. And when we add it, it means I'm just influencing the brain to produce that rhythm.
Wow.
And a lot of times people get, as a side effect, they're moodier. And so it's like, this person has anxiety. No, they actually just have these seizure spikes. And so again, it's like, this person is crazy. They're talking about the purple cookies. But what if there's something actually happening, right?
Yes.
So that's, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people who have had, from my personal experience doing neurofeedback and mapping, and they've had these spikes, and they do have this interesting way of, I don't want to say predicting, but they do have this flavor of, I'm really anxious, but I'm also tapping into something else that I can't explain, and people think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So on different levels, like that's kind of my experience with people.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the mini seizures you have yourself and what that feels like exactly?
Sure. So for me, because I was exposed to those toxic chemicals maybe almost 40 years ago now. No, I'm 40, sorry. 20 years ago.
20 years ago. Okay.
And basically, I started having difficulty with word recall. Couldn't remember, like what is this? I know what it is on the tip of my tongue. And it feels almost like my brain is thinking backwards. So I'll start speaking like Yoda. And I'll start not being very clear.
Reverse engineering stuff.
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
I know. And then it's like, it's weird, but every time I'm feeling that's what the first symptom I have.
Wow.
And so basically I've done neuro to help me, but also what makes it worse is going to be stimulants. So stimulants speed it up. So anybody who has seizure disorder, they tell them don't take for ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Because it makes it worse. So if I have caffeine and a lot of caffeine, my brain is like spike, and I am just a nutcase.
Wow. Yeah, I read an article one time about this. I think they were a psychologist, and they started having a stroke. And they realized they were having a stroke, and they started, and once they came back from it, they started to like kind of connect the dots as to like what's happening in the brain. I think what happens is something about the left brain shuts off, and they can't comprehend anything, and that's why they can't communicate, and they don't have any motor skills and stuff like that, because this is all left brain functions and stuff like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Or about strokes, or about what she experienced?
Yeah, both. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how like people who are experiencing something and can like articulate it in a way so that the outside observer understands what we're experiencing. Because a lot of times, just from a provider standpoint, it's like we're just watching it from the outside and we're making our own interpretations on what they're feeling. But when you're able to experience any type of shift in your brain, you have the power now. Because now you have the awareness of how to get yourself out of it, how to get yourself help, or how to stay balanced on your own equilibrium. But we don't really teach that anymore. We teach that the outsider's experience and understanding is the right way. And we know best. But when you tap in, you're like, oh, I felt that. I think I'm having a stroke. Okay. You know, it's a totally different experience.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah,
not from personal experience.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit too, because I was watching a clip. I think it was Aubrey Plaza, and I think she was talking about having a stroke. And basically, what was going on was that she was saying that I'm having these thoughts, and I want to articulate them, but I can't. So that made her realize that there's something wrong with my brain, but I'm not my brain. So if I'm not my brain, I'm not my body. So that gets into like non-localized consciousness. Do you believe in that at all? Do you believe in the theory that consciousness doesn't exist in the brain, but it's kind of projected to us, kind of like a radio antenna?
Oh, yeah. No, that makes a lot more sense the way you said it, because when I have patients, I tell them like, your brain's doing one thing, but your mind's doing the opposite.
Oh, wow.
And they don't necessarily think that deeply about it. But
Yeah.
I'm like, your brain is fine. I see what your brain's producing. Your brain is fine, but your mind is fighting it.
Wow.
So I do believe there is a difference in how people internalize what their brain is doing versus what their mind is doing. I don't think most people think about it that way.
Yeah.
They just think it's like, it's just me. That's just how I am. That's how I feel.
That's
It's like,
the
no.
first thing you learn on the spiritual journey is I'm
Yeah.
not the body, I'm the spirit. You know what I mean? And it gets into quantum physics. Energy is not created nor destroyed, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So and then when
You
people
know, have you seen What the Bleep?
no, I have not.
Oh my gosh, you should see What the Bleep. That's such a good movie because it talks about quantum physics.
I heard
and the
of
brain
it for
and the mind.
sure.
It's good.
Okay, okay, I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna check that. Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah.
And What
Yes.
the Bleep.
Yes.
Okay.
Man Who
cool,
Stare
cool.
Goes, we definitely have to watch that because I bring that up too many times.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna close it out pretty soon. But are there any conspiracy-based things in the psychology department or in your field of study that you've come across that are very interesting to you? Do you want to talk about it all?
Conspiracy theories. I don't know if in our field we talk about conspiracy theories. There is a level or branch of science that is called, what is it called? It's when people talk about ghosts and
Paranormal?
frequencies. Yeah, but if there's a science, I have a book on it. I forget the name of it. Parapsychology. That's what it is.
Parapsychology. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's kind of the closest thing I can think of that talks about psychology and conspiracy.
Okay.
Is there some that you know about?
I mean, just the MK Ultra and the Project Gateway and all that kind of stuff. But I was gonna ask you yourself, do you have any ghost stories or paranormal stories or anything like that yourself?
Oh, well, that's probably a deep conversation that I will talk to you offline because
Okay, cool.
Okay.
like I'm from the Midwest.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of stories that I
Yep.
grew up hearing about, and I have a different flavor on.
Well,
on that.
we're definitely gonna have you back on.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
this was
yeah,
a
this
banger
was great.
episode for sure. I enjoyed myself the whole way. It doesn't even feel like that much time has passed. But are there anything you want to leave with our listeners or anything like? Do you have any general advice for the population to help them navigate the brain waves that they have to help them with their neurofeedback, to help them ground themselves in the place they need to be grounded? Do you have any general feedback?
Yeah, I think that you have, like we just talked about, like your brain and your mind are totally different.
Observe
as
your
long
thoughts.
as you're able to tap in and see what you're feeling, that's the
Yes.
first step.
Yes.
Most of us are not internally aware.
Yes.
And I could teach that, but you have to be curious and open enough to say, like, all right, what is this going to look like for me? Do I have the patience for myself? So you can do it.
Yeah.
It's not very woo-woo science. It's been around forever.
Trust
and
your gut, your second brain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trust yourself and take that feedback everywhere you go. Trust it.
On that note, on a serious note, I just want to say real quick, on the mental health tip, if you're feeling any kind of way and you need to reach out to somebody, reach out to a friend, get some help, reach out to somebody professional.
Reach out to us.
Do that. Ask for help. Tell somebody what you're going through because, it makes it a lot easier when you ask for help. There's help around.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Thank you again so much, Dr. Leeann Marquez, for coming on
Thank you.
and telling us all of your information, sharing with us all the stuff that you shared with us. Once again, can you tell them what the website is where they can find you?
It should be Orange County Health Psych. Just let me see.
Okay, that's right.
OCHealthpsych.com.
Cool. I'll put it in the caption so you guys can find it in the caption. So this has been another amazing episode of the Outside Minds podcast. I'm your host and creator, Stilo Free. This is the other host and creator,
Down 420.
and we out.
Peace.
Yeah. So